Alrighty, hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Serving Nerve, where we talk about whatever we want, and I know I'm butchering the intro, but I'm sick, so I'm gonna justify it. Anyways, today we're gonna be going through fat acceptance, some more cringe on TikTok fat acceptance by particularly HannahTalksBodies. Now, I kind of want to go through this video because I fundamentally disagree with it for a series of reasons. And I figured I would just go through it with you, the viewer, to, bestow more distaste in your life on a common basis. Me and Hannah have a couple of things in common, one being that we use weird words and overcomplicated rhetoric in order to perpetuate our positions, I guess, when we're arguing online with people. So I figured, I may as well shoot my verbal load back at her as she shoots it out into an entire audience of people who, I don't know, are just watching, I guess. But anyways, let's just get into this and see what she has to say today.
I'm truly loving how the fat acceptance movement allows people to grow, because it's not only teaching people that health and body size are not direct corollaries, which is true, but also the bigger point, which is that health is not a requirement for people to be deserving of respect or equality. We hear this issue come up all the time in conversations around fatness, where people say things like, well, so long as you're healthy, which is basically to say that if a fat person does not have the privilege of health, then they deserve abuse and discrimination, whereas I, as a healthy fat person, don't, which is just nonsense. Understanding this is important because it's extremely tempting in the face of prejudice to cling to the health that we experience and try to present it as a representation of our moral value in an attempt to try to alleviate some of the pain that fat phobia brings. But when we do that, we are unintentionally, or sometimes intentionally, taking fat people who do not experience health and throwing them under the bus.
I'm gonna stop it right there already. So, room to grow, ironic, but we're gonna bypass that because it's an easy joke to make and I don't want to make it. But when it comes to this whole, health and body size aren't direct corollaries, they don't correlate directly. Your health can be directly affected on the basis of your body weight. Even if you want to argue that being fat isn't the problem, it's the food that makes you fat that's the problem, eating hyper-processed food that will increase your risks of heart disease and diabetes, that's what actually makes you sick. Skinny people can also have that issue. Skinny people can get heart disease. So it's not just being fat, it's an unhealthy diet. It's kind of getting around a very specific point where being overweight usually means that you're living an inactive lifestyle and you're also eating an excess of calories. Usually those calories come from hyper-processed, hyper-palatable foods. Typically foods like fast food or, junk food, things that are processed, hyper-palatable, full of saturated fat, cholesterol, sugars, It's not healthy food, and that's usually, in my opinion, what perpetuates people to have unhealthy, bodies, outside of the fact that we as a society tend to drink, smoke, and do all kinds of other stuff in the wake of our freedom as human beings living in a narcotic-riddled world. But, when we want to argue that your body weight has nothing to do with health or it doesn't directly correlate, you're just pussyfooting around the fact that it kind of does, because the things you do to become overweight are usually the things that also can make you sick.
Which is true, but also the bigger point, which is that health is not a requirement for people to be deserving of respect or equality.
That's true. I'm sorry I keep on cutting her off, but I'm going to do it through the entire video. I do personally agree with this. I don't believe that just because of the way you look, whether it's you being overweight, underweight, a different skin color, having a different, physical design, having deformities, having some sort of, physically seeable disability. When it comes to all of that, people should be able to, at least in the Western world, due to our law systems, be able to say and think and operate as they'd like to be, particularly be as fat as they want to be as underweight as they want to be. But when you have individuals who are particularly arguing for their right to exist and or be liberated, and also to formally complain to the masses because the masses aren't accepting enough of them, and to go off about wanting to be accepted as a fat person, that automatically gives people a sour taste in their mouth and makes people not want to like you. It shows where your priorities are at, and it gives them a level of, perspective on what you're personally, all about. And in that regard, people can dislike you for it. It's the same thing as having some other sort of, opinion on something else, like politics or sexual identities or, trees or wood or, I don't know, grifters online or some random crap, But when it comes to this kind of thing, people have the right also to just hate you for the way that you look and not associate with you. Like, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion, and I personally don't agree with somebody doing this, but I do think people should have the right that if they want to be shallow and not like you just for how you look, like if you're fat, then let them dislike you. What's the worst thing that can happen? At the end of the day, like, you have better things to do than focus on being loved by everybody or accepted by everybody. So when these people always go off about wanting to be accepted by society and all these people, they're always against them and, oh, life's so hard, like, do you really care about those people? I get if we want to make an argument systemically, like you want to say like, oh, well, I'm fat, so I can't get a job, here, because I'm fat, and they discriminate against me or something like that. Or, oh, I can't move, I'm in a wheelchair, I don't walk enough, but I can't walk because I feel like I'm weighed down, and, the airline, even though it's in their policy, won't help me, they won't wheelchair me up a ramp at my 600-pound form. Those arguments, I get why those arguments are there. With being accepted by people, I don't know anybody who does well being accepted. I don't really get the idea of people wanting to be accepted and loved by people and, like, just even accepted or tolerated. Like, I don't really care if I'm intolerable. I'm still gonna do my thing. And, I'm not fat. I don't really get why everybody's so obsessed with being, accepted and, we have all this tolerance and love. Like, some people just can hate. Like, let people just hate. Let it roll off your back. Like, I don't get why everybody is so obsessed with wanting to be loved by everybody. Because at the end of the day, like, most people are assholes. You don't have to get love or, approval from them. I don't understand why everybody's seeking external approval when all they have to do is satisfy themselves. You have to live with yourself forever, and other people, they're just gonna come and go like ships. So I just don't really get, like, what these people want. Even on the basis of, like, other things, I'm sure outside of me disagreeing with this woman on, haze, like health at every size, or on, like, wanting to be accepted and loved, I'm sure I could come up with something else to agree with her on outside of the context of what she's talking about. But maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would just dislike her in every capacity and find her to be an incredibly unlikable person. Either way, like, people have the right to hate each other. I just don't get it. Like, yeah, if you hate somebody for something petty, like a physical attribute, it's stupid, but still, people can do that. So I don't really get what we're looking for here. Like, do we want to have, like, just acceptance everywhere, and that's the big issue? Like, I don't really get what people in the fat acceptance movement are looking for here, because they want to be, accepted and tolerated and treated as equal to everybody else. At least that's what they say. But then they want either additional privileges that normal people don't have. They want to be, I don't know, accepted even if people don't want to accept them. And, even normal people are disliked heavily, like, for just anything. Like, you can be hated for literally anything. And, I don't know if they think that normal people aren't, if they're not fat, but everybody at some point will be hated by somebody else, or disliked, or disagreed with by somebody else. So I'm really just not sure what these people want. Like, I don't know where the satisfaction line is.
We hear this issue come up all the time in conversations around fatness, where people say things like, well, so long as you're healthy, which is basically to say that if a fat person does not have the privilege of health, then they deserve abuse and discrimination, whereas I, as a healthy fat person, don't. Which is just nonsense.
One thing I also have to mention is health is not a privilege. Health is just a basic, normal thing that most biological forms should have. Like, I feel like nowadays the term privilege has kind of been taken over by people just on the basis of, like, everything being a privilege. You not being fat is a privilege, when in reality you could argue the exact opposite, that being fat is a privilege because you have an excessive amount of food that you can eat in mass and you're not being, I guess, stopped by the government for it. You could argue privilege on both sides. Privilege itself, you can argue the subjectivity of it, but when we connotate health with privilege, health is literally just a state of being free of illness, disease, physical pain, I guess, but mostly illness and disease. And some fat people do have that privilege. Some skinny people do have that privilege. At the end of the day, we're all gonna die. But I just don't really understand the difference in treatment on health or not health when it comes to being fat Personally, if I see somebody morbidly obese and they have no diseases or they have a bunch of diseases, both of those people probably are putting themselves at the very least at risk for, future diseases of some kind or to worsen the conditions they already have. It is usually healthier in most cases in both of these situations to have somebody eat healthy, exercise, and maintain a somewhat reasonable body weight. It doesn't mean you have to look like a rail thin model. It doesn't mean that you have to even be a normal body weight. You can be probably overweight and be equally as healthy as somebody who's a normal weight. I could personally believe that. I just think that when we're arguing for things like morbid obesity and that being like healthy, or you can be healthy when you're morbidly obese, even though that does put you at an increased risk of things like heart disease, certain forms of cancer, diabetes, arterial calcification, breathing issues, sleep apnea, joint issues, like whatever you want to argue for, there's a higher risk. You might never get any of these issues, but it's still a risk. Do you want to live in a body that is at higher risk for some of these issues or for dying early?
Understanding this is important because it's extremely tempting in the face of prejudice to cling to the health that we experience and try to present it as a representation of our moral value in an attempt to try to alleviate some of the pain that fat phobia brings. But when we do that, we are unintentionally, or sometimes intentionally, taking fat people who do not experience health and throwing them under the bus.
So basically she's arguing that since you are maybe a normal weight or close to normal weight and you don't have these issues and your health is what you use to, I guess, weaponize your moral superiority, your, physical superiority over somebody else who might not experience the same things or may experience the same things as a fat person who may or may not have some of the diseases or a lack of health privilege, that you're somehow weaponizing basically your, privileged position as somebody without these diseases in order to act morally superior towards those who are in the perception of what this is below you because they're not as healthy as you, which is stupid. I think it's kind of dumb. I'm not going to lie. I think it's kind of silly to be arguing about, somebody trying to weaponize their health when in reality, this is just what it is. Like, being fat will increase your risk of certain diseases. Personally, I don't have an issue with somebody being fat or not. I do have an issue with them going on about fat acceptance and how, I have to police my rhetoric in order to make them feel accepted in their lives or, society or whatever we're talking about here. And I also would take issue with my loved one or friend, being really sick and like getting a disease early and not doing anything to change, their health by maybe eating healthier, losing weight, exercising, etc. I would be probably bothered by that. But at the end of the day, I don't use my lack of disease to act morally superior to people who may have a higher risk of disease, and I don't think a lot of people do. But, I'm kind of thinking about this in a different way, because if I see somebody who's, really sick from, excessive, drug usage or something, right? I'm thinking about it a little bit like that, where, you have somebody who's, maybe addicted to food, or addicted to drinking, or addicted to something else, and they put themselves in a position where they're unhealthy, or they have the risk for early complications, maybe a little bit later in life, or in the current life that they're living. And I think about it like that, and I'm like, well, should we accept all of these people for the unhealthy things that they're doing? Because if you want to argue for somebody being, say, unhealthy or healthy, as morbidly obese, then we would have to do it probably with everything, narcotics, drinking yourself into an early grave. I don't really like the idea of having double standards. And at the end of the day, you could argue for food being equally as unhealthy as some of these other things, like eating it in excess. So at what point do we draw the line and say that one thing is privilege when the other thing is just you making poor decisions for your health? The other thing I have to say is, I've been poor as balls before. I know a bunch of you guys have been poor as balls before. And do you use that as, an excuse to not eat healthy or exercise? Do you have that as your excuse for why you choose to, instead of eating a salad, eat a bunch of hamburgers from McDonald's? I and many other people have also experienced the unfortunate feelings of depression and anxiety and, instability in life. Do you use those things in order to justify your poor decisions? I think a lot of people have leaned on specific things like food, alcohol, narcotics. I know I'm making this kind of an excessive big picture and I'm over talking a lot and I'm making all these comparisons, but, I think it's kind of a warranted situation because if we try to justify one thing, we're going to justify everything. If we're going to justify being obese, we can also justify being anorexic. We can justify doing, narcotics. We can justify drinking. We can justify smoking. We can justify anything, because, oh, well, I might not get some of these issues, and my lifestyle is my lifestyle, and I'm in this position. I'm not as privileged as you. I just think it's dumb. Maybe I'm getting the wrong idea here, but I think it's dumb, and I think we're making excuses for things we don't need to make excuses for. And here's the thing. If you want to be fat or you want to be super duper skinny, it's totally up to you. It's your own personal decision. It's your own life. It's your own choice. It's your body. It's your decision to make things in accordance with what body you have and the lifestyle you want to live. But when you start complaining about how other people have perceptions of you, or maybe people will view you in different ways for the way that you are, being obese, or being a user of narcotics, or being an alcoholic, or being severely underweight, people will probably judge you for your decisions in life, and that's just life. And if you want to live that life, it's your choice. But I feel like arguing against other people's health superiority on a moral basis is just going to be stupid, especially when these people probably know better for themselves and therefore might know better than you about the health decisions that you make. So, I don't know. I think this is kind of crazy. I think it's a dumb idea, but that's just my opinion. I've been rambling a lot, and I have no idea where I'm going with this. I'm too sick to actually think about the consequences of my actions with saying what I'm saying online, and yeah. Anyways, that's the video. Tell me what you guys think about this, that, the other, your mother, my mom, your dad, whatever you want. Anyways, that's the video. Tell me what you think, and I'll see you all next time. It has been lovely. Slater.